Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I'm just going to speak in dulcet tones and stroke the front of my notebook and turn it over so you can see it's a Moleskine, because that's how these videos usually start, except this is a lined notebook, and so not my bullet journal. What I actually used a bullet journal is this huge notebook, which, even though I haven't been doing it very long, is already super thick and gets pretty beat up because I just throw it in my backpack all the time. Being a PhD student means my bullet journaling needs are pretty unique, and so I often have to modify my journal from what others have done before me. For example, so I've made this little pocket in the front that is made of wrapping paper, and I just keep stickers and loose pieces of paper in it that I plan to eventually stick in my notebook as decoration, but I don't do a whole lot of decoration other than cutting and pasting things because I don't have the time. I have this little index that I, keep up to date with, but I don't find super useful. Although I do like to have this year at a glance page where I can see the upcoming dates, and I do update it regularly with things that I think are really important so that they, are easily accessible when I'm making my monthly calendars. But for the most part, this kind of organizational stuff is kind of haphazard and not extremely useful to me. I only started bullet journaling last May, right after I finished my classes as part of my master's degree so that I could keep track of my research. So this is my first attempt at a monthly calendar and a habit tracker on the facing page. I started by listing all of the habits that I wanted to track along the top here, and then I filled in the boxes as I completed them with pen, which ended up being a huge waste of ink, so I don't really do that anymore. On the next spread, I just have a health tracker, which is the same as my habit tracker, and a full page to-do list, which ended up being too much space for this month. On the next page, I keep an ongoing to-read list where I just keep track of books I want to read and the date I finish them. And then on this facing page, I have my major research paper, reading and research. While I was doing research for my master's thesis, I kept track of what I was reading on this page, and I found it really useful for a project of this size to keep track of the books I was reading, whether or not it was, by chapter, whether things were useful, and whether or not I returned them to the library when that was applicable. While I don't use this system for my PhD research, I do use a software called EndNote, which is an online program where I can keep track of all of my sources and everything that I did on this kind of spread. The next two pages are ones that if I had to do it all again, I wouldn't have made because I didn't find them all that useful and I didn't end up using them to their full potential. Expense trackers can be really useful for people who need help managing their finances and to keep track of their purchases and all of that kind of stuff, but I ended up not using it very well because all of my purchases are on my credit card, and so I already have this built-in system which tells me how much I spent at what store on what day, so I didn't really need to write it down at all. The date night ideas page likewise did not work out for me, mostly because we moved to Ireland, and so most of these ideas no longer apply, but also just because we didn't refer back to this page at all when we wanted to plan a date night. It was just kind of a brainstorming page, which I thought would be useful, but then ended up not being super helpful. This is going to be a huge TMI, but I think one thing that's really important to have in a bullet journal is a page like this, which is where I track my menstrual cycle. It's important to have this kind of information handy if you go to the doctor, but also for things like planning trips and planning around your health needs. So this page takes away so much stress out of my life. This page was going to be a meal planner, but I not only didn't find it useful, I also just fucked it up so royally that I had to cover it with scrapbooking paper and stuck some dried flowers in here and just put this lovely Oscar Wilde quote to not make me so mad at it. It's also a thick page, so it helps me find my period tracker very easily, which is nice. In June, I did this smaller sidebar to-do list, which I found more useful because I can simultaneously see the whole calendar and then also the to-do list, which helped me to schedule myself a little bit better. Even though my spacing's a little off on this calendar, I did like the way that it turned out, and it was super easy to do because I just basically used tape and cute stickers that aren't staying down to decorate it, so I didn't really have to do a whole lot of setup and decoration, but it still ended up being really functional. Doing a double page tracker spread ended up being the most useful thing I discovered about bullet journaling, and I continue to do this to this day. So I basically set it up with this Xing system. It's super easy to just do this at the end of the day and just X off all of the, things I did. And at the bottom here, I just added up all the totals at the end of the month so that I could compile a kind of statistical view of my activities over the course of the whole month. I broke the month up into different sections like medication, activities, events, symptoms, and daily goals, which include things like bullet journaling every day, and then also self-care and things to avoid, so that I could keep track of, all my healthy habits, but then also things that I wanted to be productive and get done during the month. In July, I basically had no time to set up my bullet journal, so I ended up using this really lazy template where I just made some columns and stuck some stickers on it to make me feel better about the fact that I was being super lazy. But because it's such an ugly page and I hate it so much, I basically did not use this calendar at all. Although I did keep the sidebar to-do list, which I still think is the best setup. My health and habit trackers in July are likewise kind of messy and not pretty, but I did manage to keep up, although I didn't bullet journal every day. There's this one day here that I put a circle through, which means I didn't actually do it that day. I mistakenly checked it off, so I'm just putting some liquid paper over this to correct that mistake. Liquid paper has been a godsend when it comes to bullet journaling. I just find it super easy to correct all of my mistakes, and then I can just go back over the next spot that I also whited out with pen that shouldn't have been whited out, and just correct that quickly. There we go. In July, I also tried to make this productivity tracker, which I think could be really useful for some people, but for me, it didn't really work. I had intended to try and track my words written, my pages edited, and my hours spent working on my master's thesis, but there was this whole chunk of the month where I did not record what I was doing, and it's not like I wasn't working during this part of the month, I just forgot to put it in the tracker. I ended up kind of abandoning it. Likewise, I thought it would be really useful to have a project master list with all the kind of projects I was working on and then their deadlines and their completion status over here that I could just X off, but I ended up not using this mostly because I ruined the page by putting glue on the opposite side. The Sharpie bled through a little bit when I tried to cross off parts that were irrelevant, and so I ended up having to stick scrapbooking paper on the opposite side with white glue, which left all of these weird creases in the page, and because it was so ugly, I have not been using it as much as maybe I would a prettier page like this, which is one of my favorite spreads, my monthly spread for August, where I used washi tape to line out the weeks and use these fun colors that look really nice. This was probably one of my easiest monthly spreads to do, but it was also just so nice looking that I always kept up with it. And continue to use it as I intended. Likewise, for the health and habit trackers, I use this nice cloud paper, and even though the bottom here, I lost my green pen, so it's kind of ugly, let's just pretend that didn't happen. The rest of the page looks really nice, and I kept up with it most of the time, including doing the totals at the top like I did for the previous month, and yeah, so this model is really working for me. Here I gave the productivity tracker another shot, although again, didn't work out quite the way I wanted it to, even though this one is decorated really nicely. And my to-do list here is again a half a page, even though it really should be next to the calendar, because having it on its own page like this really separates out the continuity of the tracker for that month. This is also the month that I moved to Ireland. Oh no, look at that. I glued in some dried clover here because I thought it would be nice for my Ireland theme, and obviously that's not working out that well. But this is my Ireland checklist or stress list, and this is where I checked off all the things I had to get done before or right after moving to Dublin. I've also got my Dublin packing master list on the right page. I'll try and glue those bits back in later. But yeah, so this is my list of things that I wanted to get done, and then also my list of things I wanted to pack, which is all really nice and neat and kept me super organized when I was trying to do the big move. This was my first attempt at a weekly spread, which I just divided up into days using washi tape. And I did this because I had orientation the first week I flew to Dublin, and I wanted to make sure that I was taking advantage of all of the things the school had to offer. So I had my to-do list all listed here, but then I had so much extra space that I was trying to fill it out with other random lists, and so this was really kind of a waste and not a very productive way to do a weekly. For my September calendar, I ended up having a lot less space per box because I went back to this model of the one-page calendar, but I did put my to-do list on the same page again in the sidebar, which I find the most useful setup. But there's maybe too much extra decorative paper here that's kind of stiff, and that made it harder to use, although I did end up using this page quite a bit in September when I first started my PhD. My tracking pages are likewise pretty filled out. I tried to keep up with it a lot, even though I was having trouble keeping the page bent down, and I didn't really do a lot of extra decorative stuff this month other than sticking some scrapbooking paper in on the headers. October was the first month where I really tried to go all out in terms of decorating, and I did attempt to do some doodles. I was inspired by Amanda Rach Lee, who did a witch theme for her October bullet journaling. Although I tried to make mine a little more explicitly Harry Potter with the glasses and the snitches, and the sorting hat over here. I did do the half-page calendar, and then the days of the week up here are in a Harry Potter font. And then I just stapled in my schedule rather than writing it out. And I've got some room under here for notes. I've got my upcoming events in the bottom, and then the one-page calendar over here, which although it doesn't look very filled out, that's just because there's the schedule on the left page there. I found that doodling on this month's pages and really decorating it was not only like a stress relief thing, but it also helped me to remember to keep up with it. Like, I feel like the more I decorate a page and the prettier it is, the more likely I am to continue using it and to remember to bullet journal every day. I'm not sure why that is. It's just like an aesthetic thing, but I also find that it's, it helps a work-life balance to devote some time at the end of the month to doodling out my next month's pages and to really spend time being artistic and laying it out exactly how I want it and to make it useful for me. This month I did a to-do list next to my to-read list because I thought it would be useful to have those things next to each other, although I do wish I did have the to-do list on the calendar, and these due dates are, I renewed these library books, so they're not overdue right now. I also made a page over here that's just things to do in Dublin, like a tourism bucket list of things I can do when I have a day off or when I need to take a break from PhDing to do something fun. And, a lot of these things are cheap and or free and are within the city, so I don't really have to go anywhere. So that was the idea of that page. And this is my current page, so there's nothing after this. But instead of doing a weekly page, like I've seen a lot of other people do, what I've done is, I guess, a rolling weekly, where you just use these date stickers, and I write in my daily tasks of things I want to get done. When there are days that take up way more space because they have more tasks on them, I don't have to worry about going over the amount of allotted space or like pre-dividing my pages into days of the week. I just kind of do that on a daily basis. I get out my washi tape with the little date symbol on it, and just peel that up in the morning and then plan out my daily routine based on what I want to get done that day. So I have a morning routine kind of planned out. I use a super easy little checkbox system where I just do a little box for each task and then write it in, and then I've been alternating colors back and forth between blue and pink for this page just so that I can see at a glance which tasks I have finished and then which ones I have migrated. So for example, today I went on the INIS website to try and get an immigration appointment, and they were all full for today again, as they are every day, so that I'm going to have to do again tomorrow. But this is basically the way that I lay out my life right now, and I've got this in double speed to save time. But yeah, so this is my final weekly page, and if you just want to see my whole thing, I'm just going to flip all the way back really quickly. through all of the pages so you can see the progress of my journal. I think I'm getting better at it. I hope you liked today's new format, and if you want to see more videos of me talking about my journal and how I go about planning my day, maybe like this video and I'll continue doing it.